problem is I'm as confused as you are, but I will attempt to explain why it's not explainable. First, you have to define what punishment is. And we're obsessed with punishment of going to jail, which is very good. Very good.
Some say they should be killed.
If you take this and give another country, it means it's detrimental to your country. That is treason. And what was the penalty for treason? They were killing them. Treason is crimes against the state. We need to transit from making corrupt offences to become treasonable offences. Then we'll now understand what it's doing to the Nigerian state.
It looks like power is protective when it comes to corruption.
Yeah, it is, but it's common all over the globe because it's the DNA of the politician. They have really not done anything for a living. Get into public offices, boom, traveling here and there and there. So it's human nature. I'm not defending it, I'm explaining it. To want to defend that your source of income or wealth. They can't even invest. That is why the dumbest thing to do is to buy real estate. For example, in Abuja, real estate is all money laundering. Where is the business in Abuja? Where? Tell me what industry is bringing in these funds that you hear a house for 1 billion naira. Some say 2 billion naira. If you want to solve the corruption problem, the most important institution, I know you have not heard this, is actually INEC. You can see now, governance has literally stopped because they are thinking of elections. Where is INEC? There is law. Are we supposed to be having electoral campaigns now? No. The least transparent you are, the more corrupt you are. Imagine the energy used on these tax reforms. The energy used in removing fuel subsidy. You deploy 10% of that energy in fighting public sector corruption. In those 63 institutions I was talking about, corruption will drop by 90%. That is why, in my estimation, he never said he was going to fight corruption, so nobody should hold him accountable because it's evident that there is no interest in fighting corruption. We have this illusion that the more money you have, the more you are protected, and that is it. It doesn't even make sense.
It won't make sense anytime soon.
This podcast is brought to you by the Volume Pod in association with the Cable NG, Al Barka Radio, 97.5 FM, and Diazu Development.
This is Volume with FemiDlive. Let me take our time to say Happy New Year to you and to yours. Hope you had a good break, right? Good holiday, one way or the other. It's always a good time, right? And January comes along with all the things that it comes with. I would not even go into that narrative, but I do wish you the best as you walk out your January. My name is Femi Amele, and I'm glad you joined in to the show today. As always, we take on very critical issues, transforming issues that really border on national interests, national values, and, well, one way or the other, make things clearer than it is. We're seeking depth and in many rights and in many ways. Today, we want to talk about the financial system in Nigeria. To a large extent, financial system, accountability, transparency, all that comes with that terrain that's been talked about over the years many times, but gets thicker, gets murkier, and gets even more difficult to define by the day. Well, I'm glad to say to you, we have a guest with us. His name is Dr. Umar Yakubu. He's the Executive Director, Center for Fiscal Transparency and Public Integrity. He comes with a lot of reputations, a fellow with the IVLP, if I'm not mistaken, and many other platforms. He also serves as the CEO of quite a number of organizations that systemize intelligence and much more. Welcome to the program today.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too as well. All right, there's so much to cover when we think about it. And it's almost a dumb question to ask a Nigerian these days to say, what is corruption as one would define it from within Nigeria, and how it has gone on to be. Because interestingly is the fact that corruption definition and its experience often differ by whatever administration is leading at the time. How do we define it now?
Well, that's very interesting because I actually wrote a book on public sector corruption in Nigeria that was released September last year, and you were supposed to be there. You were not there.
I'm sorry, I didn't make it.
And the first chapter actually struggled with that definition. So what I concluded in that chapter 1 was that countries need to define what their corruption is. And depending on your own history on your own dynamics and how your own problems. So you define what corruption is. So when you now define it, you can now have methods on how to tackle that type of corruption. So in Nigeria, most of the time when we talk about corruption, we look at public sector corruption, what the government people are doing, what the public officers are doing. And you find out that all the discussions are around what public officers are doing. But little discussion is around what the private sector are doing, and it could be corruption. Little is talked about in the homes when, for example, parents pay for exams, to pass exams for their children. That is hardly discussed. So there are different elements to it, but within our Nigerian context, since we're obsessed with discussing with public officers, I will limit my discussions to public officers. And the reason is not far-fetched because most Nigerians do not have the basic necessities of life, starting with security. Now I'm talking about human security. You need to have food to eat. You need to sleep well, roof over your head. You need to be able to go to a hospital. You need to have good roads to achieve whatever dreams you have. Now, all these things are impeded by public sector corruption. That is why the attraction is more towards what public officers do or they do not do. So that is what corruption is in Nigeria. But that does not in any way, lessen the importance of all other aspects of corruption. Like I said, the family, within the family, within institutions, within our homes, and all these things, within our schools, our religious institutions, all these things are true and they happen. But the demon in the room seems to be the ones perpetrated by public officers. And when I mean public officers, I'm not talking about politicians alone. Public officers entail the policemen on the road, the judges, the people that render services that are supposed to make things happen. And all of them are public officers because they are supposed to be taking decisions on our behalf. So I think within our context, it is more convenient to focus on that is what corruption is in Nigeria.
Yeah, and it is really easy to incline towards that. And that's the most popular thematic area that people talk about. But I also do know your work extensively with the center, with the Fiscal Center. You work closely with media, government, and many other institutions, and even get the chance to evaluate what they do as an institution, apart from the public officers. We'll come down into the institutions, and there are what we call the transparency index around them shortly enough. But I was just very curious. And maybe I should just go into this part of it. That I read one of your publications where you talked about religion and corruption. There was the one you talked about Christian genocide, but there was also the one you talked about, even from the Muslim faith, how people who are faithless heart, right, can be corrupt and say, oh, simple allocations, simple assignments, they see differently. Nigeria is a very religious country. Very religious. In fact, many people believe that some of the tenets, or should I say the notions of faith, of the two popular faiths, comes from Nigeria. Why is it so that you can be so religious and yet committed, to the other extreme of being corrupt? How do people live out that? And I'm asking you based on the article on that.
Yeah, now this is a big one because that's actually my next book now.
Ah, okay.
Yes, that's what I'm already drafting now. Now, the problem is I'm as confused as you are, but I will attempt to explain why it's not explainable. Now, you can't have a population of 200 to 20 million, depending on the data you want to use, where at least 95% profess to a certain faith, either Christianity or Islam and traditional religion, but at least 90%. At least that's what the data says now. Now, what social studies shows, behavioral science, is that people evolve based on their immediate society. So as you are growing up, first you grow up with your parents, is what they teach you. So in every Nigerian home, or those 90%, let's stick to the 90%, 90 home, you are imbibed with those values that produced largely by tradition and by religion. But even the tradition is built around religious values. So as you are growing up as a Muslim or as a Christian, you are growing up with those values that your particular religion promotes. And luckily, both Christianity and Islam are Abrahamic religions, so they're basically largely the same in terms of those values and orientation. So now, as you are growing up with those values, the basic norms are do not steal, do not lie, do not take what is not yours. Every child has been indoctrinated, let me use that word, with those kind of values. Now, that's on the growing up side. On the external side, we all pray in mosques, we all go to church. In our language, in our communication, we profess God most of the time when we're talking. So you can see the value system, yes, we are indoctrinated or inculcated with the religious values. Now, see this same set of people doing things that contradict those things that they grew up with. Now, it becomes problematic to understand because every person that tries to do that is to imbibe or indoctrinate or inculcate or whatever what you want to call it on that child. Excuse me. So how come people now, for example, I'm a Muslim. I can give an example where you see somebody has just finished leading prayer, but happens to be the chief pay officer of a government parastatal. You are finished leading prayer, then the next thing you are not paying a contractor unless he gives you a bribe. Confusion sets in your head, like what is the relationship? So the problem we're having is that my view is that we have a lot of externalization of religion and practices. That is why we all pray, we all profess God in our languages, in our communication. We all visit churches, we go to church on Sundays. We do all these things. But the internal morality is what is lacking, which we are, let me use Professor Isibajo's language, the soft issues. You know, the soft issues is where you are not lying, you are not cheating, you are not thinking of defrauding anybody, you are ensuring you are coming to work on time, you are given a role to do, you are ensuring you are doing it to the best of your ability. So it means we now have to change our behavior. Now, back to the same confusion. How do you change behavior when you are supposed to have brought up somebody around those traditional values? So now I'll now start shifting to some Chinese, Japanese philosophy now. Because you find out, sorry, I'm not trying to discriminate, but let's say in Japan now, if you raise your voice, it's an anomaly. They don't raise their voices. You understand? There are certain things a Japanese will just not do because they have been brought up with those values. So what is wrong with theirs, or what's the difference between theirs and ours? And if you look at a lot of philosophies around the world, you find that they're behaving in a similar way. And you find that if you meet a Nigerian in Australia, in China, you find that his behavior is similar. So you find that, so it's our environment that we need to tweak in to infuse some of these values that we need to understand, that we need to be, let me not sound like I'm preaching here. You need to cleanse yourself inside first to know what you shouldn't do, whether you're a religious person or not. There are things you just shouldn't do. Then it becomes simpler when your religion has told you not to do it. So you find out whether there are consequences or not. Let's even assume there are no consequences. There are just things you just shouldn't do. So I think these are the things, now this has to happen through the same religious institutions, through our educational institutions, and through our traditional institutions, where we can have a kind of harmony of basics that should happen in our society. And that's where we see the change we're all yearn for.
And it's interesting you do say that. And I think about it. No, please feel free to go ahead. It's interesting you do say that because one recent argument that I picked up on that really, really did get me going was I was just researching around our conversation, and one editor, I'm trying to remember his name now, but alluded to the ideas around that when you look at the center of the man and he thinks about what corruption is, what his religion is, and all of that, he outweighs it and says it's a manageable risk in Nigeria and it's not a punishable risk, manageable risk. And I think about the number of corruption cases we've had in Nigeria and some of the people in the center of it and the commitment of some of the public officials who say, I will prosecute this, like the EFCC chairman saying, I will prosecute former governor of Kogi State, Yaya Bello, to the end, even if it means leaving office. And years after, he has not been able to push that beyond his own measure of the part of the work, which, of course, has its limits because there's still judiciary to deal with. The concept of manageable risk and punishable risk looks like people don't get punished in Nigeria for corruption.
Well, the first you have to define what punishment is. And we are obsessed with punishment of going to jail, which is very good. Very good. When you commit a crime, you take public funds, you should go to jail. But
Some say they should be killed.
I've written that. If you are trying to refer to me, I did not say killed. What I was trying to say was that corruption, if you study corruption in Nigeria, you understand, okay, in 40, 50 years ago, what was treason? Treason is when you take information of resources of your country and you go and give another country that will attack your own country. Mm-hmm. Now, in the pre-1940s, First World War, Second World War, that's what treason was. If you take this and give another country, it means it's detrimental to your country. That is treason. Mm-hmm. So now, why can't we contextualize? And what was the penalty for treason? They were killing them. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for a word to use now, but they were killed.
They were missed.
Yes, they were missed. So now in Nigeria now, we need billions of dollars for so many things: roads, hospitals, everything. There's somebody decides to take $1 billion or 100 billion naira, whatever currency, for that same hospital to go and take it to another country, killing your own country. That is the context of why I feel we need to even redefine what treason is. Because now nobody is selling information. In fact, there's too much information everywhere. Whatever you want to know about another country, just go online, you see it. So we are not trading secrets like that, all those kind of things. It has been liberalized, democratized. So that era has gone. It has gone for good. Now we need to redefine what treason is in a country. Treason is crimes against the state. That's what the law says, at least international definition. Crimes against your state. Now, I don't know of any crime against the Nigerian state, like taking its resources, taking it outside the country. So that was how I was trying to define what it was. I don't see any crime against the state, how you deprive your own citizens of what builds your own country, money meant to develop your country and your citizens, and you go and give another country to the detriment of your country, is crime against the state. So that was what I was trying to push for. Let us modify treason from that old age definition, because it's not applicable today. Things have moved on, so that we can now try corrupt persons as treasonable offences, not as corrupt offences.
Why do you think we can't transit that or find a hook around that? Why is the law making around that not following through on that?
Because this is just an advocacy. I don't even think the policymakers have even understood the argument of why corrupt acts should be treasonable offences first. So you have to push that narrative for them to understand the context and why it should be done. Then secondly, you and I know it will be a hard pass because of the caliber of people we have at the National Assembly. Because if they do that, unfortunately, politicians all over the world are the same. Self-interest comes, political interest comes first before national interest, and they're all the same largely, most of the countries. So that would be a hard pass. But this is the argument, because that's the element of advocacy. You continue to push to see, even not after your generation, one day it might pass. We need to transit from making corrupt offences to become treasonable offences. Then we'll now understand what it's doing to the Nigerian state. Nigeria is still bleeding, and the last data about over $15 billion a year in illicit financial flows. That is terrible, because 15 billion, that is what has managed to be captured. If you look at the undocumented ones under the shadow economy, undocumented, nobody even knows what it is. So, and the state is suffering. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you do say the state is suffering, and I start to think about some of the largest cases that are not person-driven in Nigeria the last 5 years, if not longer, if I would say longer. But I mean, the closure around that in the last 5 years was interesting. The P&ID case, we had in Nigeria, it was more about Nigeria versus... Yes, please.
Sorry to interrupt you. There was something, when you talked about punishment again, I came about before I transited into the treasonable corruption.
Okay, please do.
Now, if you look at other countries, now, what kind of punishments? There are countries where if a public officer is found, even discovered, before it's even tried, the person, out of shame, may even commit suicide.
True. That's a lot in the Asian countries.
Good. Now, that is punishment on its own. Now, the problem we have was over-focused on the legal punishment for corruption cases. We are not looking at the societal punishment for such cases. I'll give an example. I don't like to mention this, but I'll mention this. A public servant now, a public officer, was recently accused of paying $5 million for his children's school fees. Forget that ICPC or EFCC wants to investigate. That gentleman is from Sokoto State. If you are from Sokoto State, that's the seat of the caliphate. Now, what has that religious stroke traditional institution done in questioning, shaming, mentioning, whatever, of that particular individual? Considering Sokoto State is about 91% on the multidimensional poverty index.
But that will make them biased before even knowing the truth of the matter.
Now, those other societies that function, that we adore, that we love to travel and go and enjoy their good, this is what they do. The traditional or the institutions outside the legal institutions are functional. If you commit a crime, now your son goes out and comes back with an iPhone 17. You are definitely going to ask him, oh, David, where did you get that phone from? That's an institution working, the family institution. If he takes it to church, his reverend would ask, where did this money come from? At least for the Catholic Church that I know, because I read a lot, if you bring funds, they will ask you, what is the source of these funds? Just an example. For some traditional institutions, now I don't know many that do that, but I want to assume some still would ask, where is this person bringing the money from? Because now they don't want money from terrorist financing, so they're scared. You understand? These questions, these are the integrity mechanisms that are not really written on paper, but they have to function for society to function. Now, it's when those things fail or some escape, then the legal ones will come in. You understand? So those integrity mechanisms are not punishing people, are not questioning people, are not asking people the right question. That's why everybody wants EFCC and ICPC to jail everybody when the religious institutions are not doing what they're supposed to do. The traditional institutions are not doing what they're supposed to. Some say the family institutions are failed. I don't agree. There's still a lot of discipline within homes. Yes, of course, you have cases everywhere here and there. But when these ones weaken, the legal institutions cannot really do much. So those first integrity institutions need to continue doing what they are supposed to do.
And I agree with you, I mean, to a large extent, because, even though correction in the family system is now weaned off with modern Gen Zs and X and Alpha, don't do this, it's, you have to, and let me not get into that anyway. But I'm curious about the P&ID case in Nigeria. It dragged on for about a decade, if I'm not mistaken, or thereabout. And I was reading about, your perspective when it closed. And you described some characters involved. And I say characters because they provided their own personal efforts to do more than would be normal to make a difference. And I have a list of some of those names. You mentioned Nuhu Ribadu. You mentioned Ibrahim Magu, right? Nuhu Ribadu, yes, was pioneer EFCC chairman. So let's say behind this in some sort of way. But let me even focus on Ibrahim Magu. Mentioned former chief of staff as well. That's Abba Kyari. I think you mentioned Kyari as well. And there are many silent heroes you mentioned in one of your articles about the P&ID case, governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, former governor, Emefiele, and it was wondering, where are these people now? And one other corruption cases or just dealing with one thing or the other. What was the intricate story behind the P&ID case, especially from the perspective of some of these people mentioned?
Okay, for the confidentiality of a few people, I may not want to mention, but there was a reason I wrote the article. And the reason was, and the work we do at the center is we focus a lot on institutions, on integrity of institutions, not individuals. Because when you focus on individuals, they're very sensitive people, they get personal, and they will now use tactics to deny, and before you know it, you have lost the discussion and the argument. So we focus largely on institutions. Now, my argument in that article was, I just saw an article that the government, they were trying to claim credit for saving Nigeria $11 billion. Now I've forgotten the amount. $9 billion
Yeah.
also. In judgment fees in the UK for the P&ID. And I said, no. That institution, I think the institution that I was trying to take credit was the Federal Ministry of Justice. And I said, no. In fact, is when you enter an agreement with another country, a firm from another country, there are supposed to be due diligence mechanisms for all agreements. And in all those agreements, Federal Ministry of Justice is supposed to play a role in ensuring whether those agreements not are only legally binding, but are in the interest of the country. Now, fast forward, let's skip all the long story because we'll spend an hour discussing this. Is that there was a judgment against Nigeria. And there were two forces. One, which was the norm, is Nigeria pays that judgment. And why? Now I have to rewind again. Sorry. When there's a judgment against Nigeria, the norm is those public officers are in a hurry to now go and negotiate the terms of the judgment. So, for example, if they say it's $5 billion, like the Mambila case, that's an example I'll give you, and there are deep details into that as well, is they will now go and negotiate. Oh, let's pay $1 billion out of $5 billion. Now, don't forget that foreign company has not brought even a broom to Nigeria, no equipment. It's just legal, technical terminologies that Nigeria is going to pay X amount for on that judgment. What is that? Treason, acting against the state. Now, it looks on the surface like out of $5 billion, they're now bringing, let's say, to $500 million. Now, it looks like you have saved the country $4.5 billion, but you have shortchanged the country of $500 million. That's the argument people like I and a few others have. Now, that passes, and whoever is in charge says pay $500 million because we're going to lose the case in court. It's a bad case. We now don't talk about what happened to the due diligence mechanisms. Where were the public officers that were supposed to check these contracts before they were even signed? Nobody's punished for that. And Nigeria will pay $500 million, hard-earned $500 million. That is one. Two, you now say $500 million to pay. Meanwhile, you see Nigerian characters behind those companies collecting all sorts of commissions from that $500 million. Nigerians that were in government, public officers, that is for me a treasonable act because you're acting against the state through another proxy. Then when it happens, still the deal is not done. The project, is not done. Nothing executed. And there are several cases like that. And if you are an investigative journalist, go and find that there are so many under the radar.
Yeah,
that the
true.
Federal Ministry of Justice has not done much, in my own view, in trying to address those issues. So there has to be a comprehensive, one channel of how we execute all these contracts. Sometimes the ministry complains, okay, let's say Ministry of Finance, when they do it, they don't consult Ministry of Justice, or maybe when they send the file, there's no due diligence. All those things happen. Bureaucracy, I agree. But it has to be resolved. Back to the P&ID, and this company was supposed to do some gas infrastructure work, and nothing happened. We reneged on our own part and were supposed to pay £9 billion or dollars or whatever the amount was now. Now, like I told you, this set of actors on the left wanted Nigeria to pay. Standard what they do. Go, negotiate with the people behind, get their commission, there'll be a team of consultants behind them, get their commission, I get paid. Now, the EFCC decided to say no. One, we didn't have the money, the £9 billion or dollars to pay. We didn't even have it. And if we have, why would you pay $9 billion? So
fine.
Out of all the institutions, only the EFCC and the Central Bank of Nigeria.
That's Ibrahim Magu-led EFCC and
Yes.
CBN Emefiele-led.
Ibrahim Magu-led EFCC and Emefiele-led Central Bank of Nigeria were the only two institutions. You can make whatever we ought to make of the remaining institutions. Were the only two institutions that said no. And it was EFCC that initiated the argument that, look, this is a fraudulent matter, and that's their expertise to detect fraud. this is a fraudulent matter and it should be treated otherwise. And there were officers behind the EFCC. I wrote them in the article. It's
Abubakar
Balasanga
Balasanga,
was
yeah.
one. He was the lead. There was Babangida. He's a policeman. The policeman we love to vilify. There's Abba. I learned he's a senior advocate of Nigeria now. One other lady, I've forgotten her name, and a few officers that now formed the crux of the case to say if we can show that these people are fraudulent, there is a fraudulent company, their registration was even registered is in one of those tax havens. A lot of due diligence issues. That's on one part. On the second part, that there was evidence of the Nigerians they bribed to even get that contract in the first place. The treasonable acts I like to talk about. A foreign company came and bribed your own officials to cheat your own country. These are the issues. So if they prove that case in court, in the London court, then we may have a chance of not paying that $9 billion. I keep forgetting the amount now. £9 billion or 11 billion pounds. Now, EFCC, in my own estimation, does not have the kind of resources to execute such cases in London. Now, this is where the Emefiele-led CBN came in. And what I learned was it was a late Abakari that said, called these two together and told Emefiele, look, there's a problem on ground. You need to find this. So he provided the resources, not him, the central bank, at least provided the resources to help the EFCC prosecute the case. And now, when after the long haul of Nigeria not paying the amount, we want judgment, then you come and see that same ministry that failed in its due diligence in the first case, the same ministry that wanted to pay or negotiate is now coming to claim credit for the P&ID case. I said, no. Sometimes we like to criticize institutions, but when they do well, we should at least now, once in a while, say they have done well. And that's why I wrote on that article and single-handedly said it was Ibrahim Magu-led EFCC. And the Emefiele, they love to vilify now. They're the one, he's one being prosecuted now, is the one that saved this country of that amount. And we should just commend them. And we're not saying that they did not have faults in other areas. But on this P&ID case, if you are going to give national honor or commend these people, it should actually be Emefiele and the people, Director of Legal Kofo Abdul Salam, there are other people under the central bank, and the EFCC, these gentlemen I've mentioned, they are the ones that should be commended for national honors, and this is not the kind of characters you are giving national honors.
Talking about the characters, including the one of yesterday, celebrated his 80th birthday, and people started bringing out social media, capture of how Abacha loot and the likes of that. It has always been very argumentative who the president possibly endorses for honor or gives a pardon or the likes of that. Why has that been so? Because it looks like power is protective when it comes to corruption. Isn't that so?
Yeah, it is, but it's common all over the globe because it's the DNA of the politician. Because the politician, really, most of politicians, or let me stick to the Nigerian politicians, is if you find out in their previous life, they have really not done anything for a living. They don't have any enterprise, any company, any firm. They really don't do anything. So their primary business or primary occupation is politics. And that cannot be a primary occupation. It's supposed to be transitory, you understand? But in Nigeria, most of the time, primary occupation is politics. Before going into politics or public office, you find out they had one car, one house in their village, one in their primary town. Get into public offices, boom, traveling here and there and there. So it's human nature. I'm not defending it, I'm explaining it. To want to defend that your source of income or wealth. That is why the obsession for public office is too much in Nigeria, because the private, they really didn't know anything. And that is why you find out. And look at most politicians that get out of the system, maximum 2 years, 3 years, you find out they're starved. they are all malnourished. So they will start struggling on how to get back to that same dream pipe because that's the only thing they know. So it's just normal human behavior. When you are not used to being enterprising, not used to generating wealth, not used to managing people, and then boom, you just see yourself managing billions of naira and you have kickbacks to take, bribes to take, all this is to take, and your family has expanded now, your source of wealth has expanded, and you find out, look at all of them, and when I mean all of them, 90% of them, they can't even invest. That is why the dumbest thing to do is to buy real estate, because they can't even think of what to do. They can't build this studio. They can't really think. So it's buy real estate. Go and lock up capital there. Okay, when I'm broke, I can go and sell it. That is all they can. But because the training of how to generate wealth is not there. Politicians elsewhere, you find that they are from the private sector. Bankers, doing a lot of the investors. Then they go into politics. When they leave politics, they go back. But of course, there where there will be conflict of interest, where maybe there are politics,
especially in the UK.
Yes, influencing their businesses, fine. But ours, our own, they are not influencing anything. It's just to go, take money, buy real estate, travel as much as you can, abroad, go and buy real estate abroad, standard money laundering, and come back. No initiative. You can't even build a radio studio. Pure water factory, they don't build. A few now, I don't know why, at least a few now are building schools, universities, maybe because they are seeing return. Those that seem to be a little bit, exposed. But others are just locking up capital in real estate. That is why you can see all the boom. For example, in Abuja, real estate is all money laundering. Where is the business in Abuja? Where? Tell me what industry is bringing in these funds that you hear a house for 1 billion naira. Some say 2 billion naira. You hear all sorts of amounts. They renovated a house for 1 billion naira. What business can you do? Dangote cannot and will not renovate his house for 1 billion naira.
He even claims he has just one house in Nigeria, doesn't have a house abroad, and that his directors have houses abroad, but he doesn't.
Because he knows the value of wealth creation. He knows the pain of wealth creation. But here you see a public officer openly telling he renovated 1 billion naira. Why? He does not know the pain of wealth creation. So that is the problem we have.
And I'm just going to touch on one more subject around corruption before I even bounce into some other terrain as regards institutions that you work with and evaluating them in terms of their transparency and the lacks of that. I mean, I have not in recent times seen a bold pushback like with Yaya Bello, where the EFCC chairman came out clearly and said, see, I'm going to prosecute this guy, and if I don't go through with this, I would leave my position. And it appears Yaya Bello is taking up interest, as the former governor of Kogi State, taking up interest in running for a senatorial seat, even at this time. And, there's this sense of protection. That's one high-profile case. But generally, the profile cases under President Tinubu is not so many.
It's not, like I said, I don't like to talk about individuals. It's a systematic problem. And the people that brought this problem are this set of political class is that there is too much interest in politics. The rate of returns is too high. That is why most of them are going into politics. How many governors have been prosecuted, if you really look at the number? Not even about it. Even the last president pardoned about 2 or 3 governors that were actually jailed. So you can imagine what the morale of the law enforcement and the anti-corruption agencies would be. Abaya Bello, he's being prosecuted. I'm aware he's being prosecuted. But why they need cover? Look at all the governors, almost all of them have cases, it's in the public domain, have cases with anti-corruption agencies. So to provide cover is to go and hold public office. That is just why they do that. They do that because the institution has a way of protecting you. Either you are a political donor or you are funding a party or you are funding the elections, which is why in 2026 or in this decade, on our present times, if you want to solve the corruption problem, the most important institution, I know you have not heard this, is actually INEC. They are the institution that enable and unleash all these people on the system. INEC has the Electoral Act, powerful law. There's a whole section on political party regulation. I have not heard on anything regarding political party regulation by INEC. Under the political party regulation, there are elements, strong elements of political financing. INEC itself, to start with, does not even release its own audit reports. They find a way of bulldozing their way to say they need X billions to conduct elections. Federal government, because they want to look good, will always be releasing those billions to them to conduct elections, highly inefficient elections, because there are a lot of areas you can save money. That's what I mean by efficiency. A lot of areas you can save billions of naira. They will go and be wasting the environment, printing papers here and there, distributing, burning diesel, carrying airplanes to distribute materials. A lot of waste in the process because they have collected billions they need to expend. Then when they finish, they come and deliver shamble elections. That's not my interest in the kind of elections they deliver. It's the process and the efficiency. Now, again, INEC is supposed to regulate political parties to ensure that where the funding for political party financing comes from, they have not done anything since 1999. When they want to distract you, they will now tell you, oh, we need another agency, we cannot prosecute, we cannot do this. You have regulatory powers. Enforce your regulations. Nobody is telling you to prosecute. When you enforce your regulations, or you can't, you have the law enforcement, the police, or whoever to go and enforce for you. But when they want to distract you, they will now say, oh, we want another institution. Then it will take 10 years to establish the organization. They are all distracted. So if INEC would just focus on political party regulation with emphasis on political party financing, electoral financing, all these pressures will reduce by 70 to 80%. Because if you look at all the scavenging for funds, is to how to run elections. Now, when you run elections and you taste the forbidden fruit, you want to maintain your seat, they will start running around again for money to maintain their structure so that they will run for elections. Now, if they win, they need more money to maintain the seat. If they lose, they are running around to look for money to come and get that seat. So it's INEC that is failing us badly. Not in how they produce our leaders in that political party financing. And I want you to push this narrative, you're a media house. If we don't put pressure on INEC, the cost of elections, if you look at the budget, right from 1999 or 2003, you find out, and we have data on that, the cost of elections continue increasing on two sides. One, the money that INEC keeps demanding to conduct this kind of elections that they're conducting. Then the political spending. Before they used to bribe people, let's say 1,000, 2,000 naira. Now here they are paying 10,000 naira per vote. Then even now the cost of forms, even the cost of getting an office. I don't know of any state today that you can become a governor with 2 billion or 3 billion naira. It's in the tens of billions to become a governor. Even some states, House of Rep member, you see them spending 5 billion naira to become House of Rep member. Lawmaker, they are spending 5 billion. You have to recoup that money. And what do? They start terrorizing those MDAs for all the contracts, all the slots. So you can see how INEC's failure to discharge its duties is putting pressure on the whole system. Now, when they fail, they now start shouting EFCC, ICPC, fight corruption. How? They can only get the remnants of that failure. And you can see now, governance has literally stopped because they are thinking of elections. Where is INEC? There's law. Are we supposed to be having electoral campaigns now? No. But INEC has not done anything. They are just kept quiet. They are there looking for money to come and conduct election next year, tell us they are conducting election, and they go to sleep for the next 4 years, then come back again, do another set of elections, and go back. So this is the problem we're having.
Yeah, and you bring a fresh perspective, just like you said, when you think about it from INEC and the number of politically exposed people who are still able to contribute into political parties. It's interesting that somebody could be politically exposed. And by the way, there's a list of politically exposed people. I know it's on your website as well. And also on your website is the Transparency and Integrity Index. You've released this report since 2021, and the 2025 one came out September 8th. And I find it interesting that you had 517 MDAs that you said, okay, maybe not too bad. They provide a level of transparency, and then about 511 in the red zone. And in the red zone is FIRS in the red zone is the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. What am I missing on? I mean, the DMO is also in the red zone as one of the calibrations you did when you looked at the parameters you used. Let's talk about those institutions in the red zone. In fact, Accountant General of the Federation, these guys deal with money. Debt Management Office deal with money. What is so mystical about them being transparent that, your organization, as Center for Fiscal Transparency would rank them as such?
Yeah, two things. One, we decided to change. We brought in an innovation, and it's being recognized globally now, slowly. Because even at the last Conference of State Parties at the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, we have done that presentation twice as one of the tools for measurement of corruption. Because the whole world is struggling how to measure corruption so that you know how to counter it. So our center is proud to say we developed our tool, a homegrown tool. Now, our own is. The philosophy behind our methodology is the least transparent you are, the more corrupt you are. And when we say transparency, is not actually accountability. It's just to publish what ought to be in the public domain. Sometimes I like to use the analogy for those of us that are married to say, if your wife does not have access to your PIN number, to your bank account, to your social media channels, you are not transparent, you are likely hiding something. Now, it's possible you are not giving her and you are not hiding anything.
I'm just going to smile around that answer.
Yes, it's very possible. But if she does not have access to your WhatsApp, to your social media channels, your bank accounts, you are likely. So that's the premise of our argument. So when a government institution, a public institution, is not opening up its books, it is likely our assumption that you are hiding something and you are doing things that are not supposed to be done. So that's the philosophy behind the Transparency and Integrity Index. And we have 5 parameters, as you know. You anchored the first program, the second one, is we have fiscal transparency, and there are sub-variables under it. We have open procurement, where all the fraud goes through in the procurement, human resources, citizens' engagement, and control of corruption. And there are about 29 sub-variables under those 5 critical pillars. Now, that's on one side. On the second side, you have 517 federal public institutions, 36 state governments, and 774 local governments. Now, out of those 517, don't be distracted with the 517. Where the core is, where the action is there are those they call government-owned enterprises. Now, there are only about 63 of them. And under them, they are in 3 categories too. One, they generate money, like the NNPC, take what they want to take, give federal government the change under their whatever agreement they have. The second category, they have a percentage in their law. I think the FIRS, the customs, for whatever they generate, that what needs to be defined. Generate. They take a certain percentage and give. The third category, if I'm not mistaken, is when they generate, then government gives them they generate, but they fund their activities by themselves. I think it's like the CAC, the Corporate Affairs Commission. So there are little nuances in between this. Because even that generates, we can have a whole session. What is really generation? You understand? All the efficiencies around it and inefficiencies actually around it. But now, those 63 is where the major public sector corruption is because of the huge amount of money. One example, there are some of those agencies that what they generate and keep for themselves, that 4% or 5% of whatever the act gives them, is more than what 3-4 states in Nigeria get. One institution. Just one. Now, how don't you expect? Now, that is what, to even start with, is totally inefficient. Because you find them recruiting staff they don't need because they have so much money. Engaging in foreign trainings, the local trainings that they don't need because there is too much money. Be giving out contracts, political patronage to all these politicians because the money is not just too much for the organizations. So that is inefficiency on its own. not even corruption, which is a part of corruption. So those are the MDAs when I say, okay, publish all these sub-variables. How much you are spending on your capital, how much you are spending on your recurrent. If you have done procurement, who are the contractors? Why are you even giving this set of contracts? Because if you go deeper now, you see ridiculous kinds of contracts. Every year they are buying ACs. Maybe it's global warming they want to protect. Every year they are buying cars. Every year they are buying all these things because that's how to siphon money through procurement.
Newspapers and, of course, more.
Newspapers, there's a time, FRS, I don't know what year, their budget for newspaper, they are not a research institution. Their budget for newspapers, if I'm correct, was like 400 million. But please correct, it's in my article, but I need to check it. Whatever the amount was, it was more than the budget of what a standard university gets for research. But that's what they were using to buy newspapers. This is where the inefficiency comes in. You have not funded research to universities, to technical institutions, and you are using, you have an FRS has 400 million or whatever amount for that. So if you look at the budget, that is why sometimes I tell some of my colleagues in the civil society about following the money, how they're spending it. For me, that should not even follow what the basis of even the contract itself is inefficient, is faulty. What is there to follow the money in somebody spending $1 billion naira on fueling cars? What's there to follow? Why should you be spending $1 billion naira in fueling cars? And you see, one mistake, and we predicted it when they removed the fuel subsidy. Some of us said, government will not cut their coat according to their size. They will not. They will not share their appetite for all these frivolities. That is why they still travel, how they want to travel. They're still buying cars. Femi, you see a Jeep now for 300 million naira, and you see a public official with 4 in his fleet. That's 1.2 billion naira.
Yes.
You see, they have not shared anything. They're still burning diesel while you are here but putting solar, thinking of alternative means of energy. Nothing in their appetite has reduced because they're already used to it. They're addicted to public funds, free public funds.
But the president doesn't believe so. I mean, on August 26th of 2025, he was at a meeting abroad where he talked about the fact that, all he has done with all the reforms he has done and a lot of things he has done, he ended that statement by saying, no corruption. Those were the last 2 words from that meeting where he alluded to the fact there's no more corruption. And he believes that they've streamlined government spending and that, yes, we went through a tough time at the start of his administration, but things are better now, according to much of his perception, and that things are really looking up in terms of sizable government.
To be fair to the president, I'm not aware he ever said he was going to fight corruption, so he's actually living up to his mandate.
Why do you think he never said so?
He never said, there's a difference between political statement and the action you do. You can say, all those speeches is normal, we'll fight corruption, we'll reduce our debt, we'll fight security, you do this, you do this, you do that. Give examples, we're going to have tax reforms. He mentioned it. It's evident. You can see we're having tax reforms. We're going to remove fuel subsidy. It's evident we're going to remove subsidy. Now, when you say you are going to fight corruption, there are things you see beyond what you have said, and we have not seen those things. What is happening is the institutions are still doing their best. I'll forever say that. They're doing what they can do. But the political will, imagine the energy used on these tax reforms. The energy used in removing fuel subsidy, the energy used in the way, I don't like to discuss politics, but let's say the energy used in bringing people to the ruling party, for example. You deploy 10% of that energy in fighting public sector corruption. In those 63 institutions I was talking about, corruption will drop by 90%. I'm telling you to drop. So the political will is not there. Imagine the president now saying anybody found wanting in public, on TV, and sets an example. And with all due respect, President Obasanjo did that. He gave examples. Some might say he was selective, but there were examples of people within his inner circle that were prosecuted and he supported. That is why then the EFCC succeeded. So if that political will is really not there, so about saying it and writing it is different from your actions, and that is clearly not there. But like I said, that is why, in my estimation, he never said he was going to fight corruption. So nobody should hold him accountable, because it's evident that there is no interest in fighting corruption. At least the political will is not there. This is my view. To your second question, no, I've forgotten.
Oh dear. Okay. Even I have stayed so close to what you're saying that I lost track of what I asked. But it's okay. There's still something else I wanted to push on, and if I do remember what I was getting out on that, I will still come back to it. But I was thinking about the transparency index as well. The sub variable, for example, one of the prominent sub variables you had is budget allocated, budget released, and budget implemented. And I'm wondering, those three phrases, they never really meet in the Nigerian financial system. We only meet the schedule of when the budget starts. I was with someone recently who told me that the 2025 budget is not kicked in, and this was about October, November. And I was wondering, how then do you use this to track the performance of institutions that rely on this money to do things? So they'll tell you, you saw it though, doesn't mean that it is coming our way as it is. How does your organization been able to deal with such complex and fluid situation?
Yeah, it's actually very easy, because like I tell most of my colleagues in the civil society, let's not get too distracted. Oh, they budgeted 100 billion for X amount, and we'll all start shouting. Really, how much is being released? But the critical component, the ones we should focus on, is budget implementation report of every MDA. All of us in our houses, we have budgets for the year, how much you pay for school fees, how much you pay for electricity, and we check, we manage. Why you see this waste everywhere, just waste. And all this our talk, if you notice, which is the problem you and I have, we are focused on the federal level. We are not even going to subnational level. The waste that goes on at the subnational level is something that we have to discuss another day. Now, but if you now look at budget implementation report, now, because if you have a good budget implementation report, how effective has it been in reducing, for example, poverty? How effective has it been in creating jobs? So we're just running budgets, that's just waste. Is not really tied to what we should do. And my pain in this is that Nigeria, and I said this on Arise, if I'm correct, the political class forgets that Nigeria is not the only country in the world. There are over 200 countries that are competing because they are moving. We are just behaving like everything is fine, and everything is not fine. And that is why they are reckless in their spending. They are so inefficient in what they do. They don't understand. And another problem is the politician does not understand. He can actually have a win-win situation. If you invest in the people, invest in infrastructure, your life is easier. Now look at all of them moving with policemen. Look at when they said they should withdraw the policemen, they all started running around, going to see with this. So we have this illusion that the more money you have, the more you are protected, and that is it. And all of us who fall sick, the next thing we want to check out of the country, and you just can't. And before you know it, it's late. So all this is in our interest to have good hospitals, have good roads, have security, so that everybody is at peace. But I don't know what language you are going to use to this political class to understand that this level of taking money and taking it out and buying property is not helping anybody. You can have a win-win situation. Now, I'm not promoting this, but you have taken money. If you have built a hospital, it's still better, though you should not take anybody's funds to build a private hospital. It shouldn't happen, or build a school or university. But at least they should start having these conversations about investing within the country or wherever. If you take public funds, I'm not promoting this. I keep saying it. I'm not. But it's better than taking the money outside to buy property that you'll be paying tax every month on that
heavy
property.
tax,
heavy tax on that property. It's actually it doesn't even make sense.
No, it won't make sense anytime soon, right? As well. Because if you look at the billing on those taxes, it's something else. I have to say a big thank you to you at this point in time. I mean, despite dealing with the code, you've taken your time to speak to us today. Well, that's it for us. Dr. Umar Yakubu, Executive Director, Center for Fiscal Transparency and Public Integrity, has been speaking with us thus far. And there's a lot to have learned. Thank you so much for coming on Volume with FemiDlive.
Yeah, welcome.
All right. All right. Keep your comments coming in. I'm grateful that you write in. People argue. It's okay if people don't agree with your viewpoints on things, but I do see the comments and read them. I try to get in there sometimes, but when the fight is intense, I stay out. Well, I'm grateful that people keep writing in and, of course, sharing their thoughts on this. And that's it for us today. I am P.H.D. Amele.